Sagittarius urgent. What's coming has never happened. Decisions now. Shocking reward. Dear Sagittarius, you are not just a sign ruled by fire. You are the fire. A living torch carried through lifetimes, glowing with ancient truths and untamed wisdom. And today your flame flickers not from wind or doubt, but because something extraordinary is approaching. Not a warning but a calling. Not fear but a divine summons. This moment you're walking into is unlike any you've ever known. It's not a coincidence that you're hearing these words right now. Something in your soul has already sensed the shift. A tug in your chest, an echo in your dreams, a silence that suddenly feels meaningful. That's not imagination. That's prophecy. A sacred gateway is opening. One that only reveals itself to souls who have walked with integrity, even when no one was watching. You've been brave for too long, strong for too many, and quiet in places where your roar was needed. But this weekend something shifts. Something arrives. And you, Sagittarius, must finally make the one choice you've always postponed. To fully receive the life that has been waiting for you. If your heart is nodding already, stay with me. Like this video if it stirs something in you. Share it with someone who still believes in miracles. And if you're new here, subscribe. Because on this channel we don't chase light, we become it. Gate 1. You were not born into this moment by accident. You were sent to awaken it. Sagittarius, you were never meant to follow the well-lit path. You are the one who forges the trail through the unknown. You weren't sent into this world just to survive it. You were sent here to ignite it. And now, something is happening that cannot be explained by logic or even by the stars alone. Because this moment right now is one that no map could prepare you for. This is not fate unfolding. This is your own soul remembering a sacred contract signed long before you took your first breath. Have you been feeling it lately? That subtle discomfort, the restlessness in your bones, the quiet whisper that something is coming. But you don't know what? That's not anxiety. That's recognition. That's your soul standing at the doorway of a cosmic portal that only opens once in a lifetime. You didn't stumble into this moment. You were led here. The decisions you make now about your time, your energy, your purpose are no longer small. They are defining. And what's arriving next isn't just a gift. It's a return. A long-delayed restoration of something that has always been yours. You, Sagittarius, are the sign of the seeker, the philosopher, the spiritual warrior who dares to dream even in a world drenched in doubt. But lately, you've given so much to others that even your own fire began to flicker. You've stayed quiet to keep the peace. You've carried weight that wasn't yours just to be the strong one. You've shrunk not out of fear, but out of love. But now the universe is intervening. Not to demand more from you, but to give something back. Something too large to ignore. You've walked with integrity in rooms that did not honor you. You've shown up for people who would have never crossed oceans for you. And while others were taking, demanding, receiving, you were planting seeds. Seeds of light. Seeds of honesty. Seeds that asked for nothing in return but carried the soul of who you are. Those seeds are blooming now. Not just in the physical realm, but in the deepest energetic layers of your life. You are being prepared to receive something sacred. Not as a reward for perfection, but as a natural consequence of alignment. This is not the time to doubt your path, Sagittarius. It's the time to trust your knowing. That quiet, unshakable knowing that has followed you through every mistake, every heartbreak, every chapter where you thought it was over but kept walking anyway. You know that part of you, the one that whispers keep going when there's no sign you should? That voice is rising now. And it's not just guiding you. It's summoning you. Right now, somewhere in your energetic field, a golden light is beginning to pulse. It's soft, like the color of candlelight reflected on water, but it is real, and it's drawing toward you something rare. A life that mirrors the goodness you've poured into others. A chance not just to be acknowledged, but to be restored. And yet, here's the truth that no one tells you. Receiving is not always easy for those who were taught to give. It's hard to open your hands when you've spent a lifetime offering instead of asking. It's uncomfortable to stand in the light when you've grown used to the quiet comfort of shadows. You've mastered how to inspire others, but have you truly let yourself be supported? Have you truly allowed the universe to care for you the way you've cared for everyone else? This is that moment. The moment where the old story, I must always be strong, I don't need much, I'm fine as long as they're okay, is gently released. And in its place a new truth rises. I am allowed to receive. I am allowed to expand. I am allowed to become what I was always meant to be. In Buddhist teachings, this is known as the moment of ripening, the karmic return not of fortune, but of balance. Every time you spoke truth in a world of manipulation, you planted a seed. Every time you held space for someone else's grief without asking for anything back, you watered it. Every time you chose compassion over resentment, patience over reaction, faith over fear, you grew an invisible garden. And now it is harvest time. But don't expect thunder. Don't wait for fireworks. This reward arrives like Sagittarius itself, quiet at first, and then suddenly everywhere. It might be a conversation that changes the course of your work, a message from someone who once disappeared, returning with words you thought you'd never hear. Could be financial, it could be spiritual, it could be both. But it will feel like peace. Like the moment you finally come home to a version of yourself that you thought had disappeared forever. And yes, there may still be moments of doubt. You may still wonder, why now? Why me? But I want you to remember this. You are not being given something you didn't earn. You are being returned to the path that was always yours before the world tried to pull you off course. This is not about destiny choosing you. This is about you remembering that you were destiny's chosen all along. You've sacrificed without recognition. You've taught without being credited. You've led without applause. And still you kept going. That is the kind of strength that cannot be faked. That is the kind of strength the universe bows to. And now the bow is being returned. Not through chaos but through confirmation. So what do you do now? You receive. You breathe. You stop dimming your brilliance. You stop apologizing for your vision. You say yes without guilt. You say thank you, instead of are you sure? You let the doors open. You let the reward find you. You let yourself be seen. Not just as the one who helps, but as the one who deserves miracles. Because you do. And in the next gate, we will dive into the reason this reward could never have gone to anyone else. A reason rooted not in coincidence, but in lineage. Because something inside your ancestral memory is awakening. Something ancient. Something that has waited lifetimes for your hands. But before we go there, pause. Place your hand on your chest. Close your eyes. And repeat these words softly, as a sacred offering. I no longer run. I no longer chase. I am ready to receive what was always mine. Gate 2. You are the one your ancestors chose long before you were born. Sagittarius, have you ever wondered why you often feel like the outsider even among your own people? Why there's a fire in your soul that no one seems to fully understand? Why you've always sensed you were carrying something older, something weightier, something that didn't quite belong to this time? It's not your imagination. It's ancestral memory. It's the whisper of those who came before you, speaking through the wind in your chest, through the stillness in your blood. You weren't just born into this lifetime, you were sent, chosen, handed a torch that had been carried by trembling hands, passed from one soul to the next, waiting for the one strong enough to run with it without letting it burn them from within. That one is you. There is a moment that happens only once in a soul's timeline. A moment where past, present, and future all converge into a single choice. Not the kind of choice that screams or demands attention, but the sacred kind. The kind that decides the fate of not just a life but a lineage. Sagittarius, you are standing in that moment right now. Not by accident. Not by coincidence. But because your soul was prepared for this long before you were even born. The challenges you faced, the betrayals, the loneliness, the false starts, they weren't detours. They were initiations. Firewalks. Spiritual trials to refine not your reputation but your resonance. You were not being broken, you were being shaped. Somewhere in your ancestry, someone once knelt under the stars and prayed. Maybe they were a woman, worn and tired from life's injustice. Maybe a man silenced by circumstance, but inwardly roaring with unspoken dreams. Maybe a child who didn't know why they were crying, but felt the weight of generations in their tiny bones. They prayed not for themselves, but for the one who would come after. The one who would break the cycle. The one who would reclaim the lost light. And that one, Sagittarius, is you. You may not know their names. You may never have heard their stories told, but their hopes run through your veins. Their unfinished work is woven into the restless pulse of your being. Their rewards, the ones they were denied, are waiting to be delivered through you. That's why the path has been heavy. That's why the pressure has felt unreal. Because you are not just living your own life. You are completing a sacred loop that has remained open for centuries. In spiritual teachings, this is known as soul convergence, the moment when the living and the dead walk together, not through ritual but through purpose. And it only happens when one soul is strong enough to carry the weight of all who came before, and light enough to transform it into freedom. You are that soul. The convergence is happening now. That's why your dreams have become more vivid. That's why certain memories have resurfaced, uninvited but impossible to ignore. That's why you keep seeing the same numbers, hearing the same name, feeling the same pull to revisit an old passion or make peace with a past you thought was buried. It's all happening by design, because the door is opening. But here's what no one tells you. Doors like this do not open for everyone. Not because others are unworthy, but because most souls are not yet ready. Most would turn away. Most would ask for more time. But you, Sagittarius, you said yes even when you didn't understand the full weight of what you were agreeing to. You accepted the call in silence. You stayed steady in the dark. You kept loving, even when love wasn't returned. And now the gift is arriving. Not as a luxury but as a legacy. Not as a handout but as a handover. This reward isn't being sent to you. It's being returned to you. Something that has been carried on the backs of those before you is now being placed in your hands. But to receive it fully, you must recognize one truth. This gift was never withheld because you were unworthy. It was delayed because your soul needed to become strong enough to protect it. Too many blessings are wasted in the hands of the unready. The universe does not repeat that mistake. It waits. And now it has chosen. It has chosen you. So what is this gift? It may manifest in different ways. Money that comes suddenly from sources you forgot about or never imagined. A job offer or creative opportunity that seems to have your name on it. A relationship that feels familiar, as though you've loved each other across centuries. But none of these are the true gift. They are only the forms. The real reward is the lifting of the veil, the remembering of who you are, not in the eyes of the world but in the eyes of your soul, the return of your original light, that fierce, tender, undiluted fire that once blazed in you before the world tried to tame it. Your ancestors did not pray for you to be safe. They prayed for you to be free. And now that freedom is arriving. But you must meet it not with fear, but with readiness. Not with apology, but with open hands. That means no longer playing small just to be accepted. No longer withholding your brilliance to keep others comfortable. No longer hiding your wild joy just to seem reasonable. The time for shrinking has passed. This moment is not a rehearsal. It is a return, a reconnection, a radiant reckoning between who you were, who you became, and who you were always meant to be. Take a breath, Sagittarius. Feel your chest expand. Not just with air, but with the presence of all those who stand behind you now, unseen but real. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You were simply walking ahead of the blessing so it could recognize you when the time came. And that time is now. There is a word in sacred Sanskrit that means grace passed through generations. The word is anugraha. It means an ancient blessing delayed but undiminished. That is what you are receiving. That is what is activating in you right now. You may not see the full picture yet, but you will feel the shift. In your bones, in your energy, in the way strangers speak to you, opportunities find you, and your own reflection begins to look a little more like the truth each day. Before we move into the next gate, where we will meet the destined soul who has been walking parallel to your timeline, I invite you to write down a sacred sentence. Not to manifest, not to attract, not to beg, but to affirm what has already been decided. I carry the light of those before me. I am ready to complete the circle. Gate 3. A soul is coming, not to complete you, but to remind you of who you truly are. Sagittarius, let's pause here. Not to stop the journey, but to catch our breath before the most sacred turning. You've walked so far already. Through the ache of silence. Through the weight of expectations. Through the valleys of not being understood. But now, as you reach this hidden passageway in your soul's story, something ancient begins to stir. It's not a memory. It's not a hope. It's something deeper, a recognition. And it doesn't begin with words. It begins with a presence. A quiet yet unmistakable energy. Someone is approaching. But not just someone. A soul. A soul whose path has been silently running parallel to yours across lifetimes. A soul that does not arrive to fix you, save you, or complete you, but to stand beside you as an equal, as a mirror, as a sacred witness to who you've always been beneath all the masks you've had to wear just to survive. This is not the fairy tale you were once told. This is not a romance spun from longing or a craving to be held. This is the arrival of someone whose presence feels like peace. So familiar it's almost unsettling. So quiet it makes the noise of the world disappear. You may have met many before. Lovers, teachers, companions. Some have touched your body, others your mind, but very few have ever touched your soul. Because the soul cannot be touched through charm or intellect. It is only reached through frequency. And that frequency, yours, has been evolving, sharpening, deepening. And now that you've crossed a threshold in your energy, this soul is being drawn in, not because you seek them, but because you finally aligned with the part of you they were meant to recognize. You may not know it yet. You may cross paths in a way that seems trivial at first. A random message, a shared glance in a place you almost didn't go to, a conversation that begins with laughter but ends in tears. There will be no sign in the sky. There will be no dramatic soundtrack. But your soul will know. It always does. You'll feel it in the way time shifts, in the way your heart quiets instead of races, in the way your usual defenses forget to rise. Not because you're unguarded, but because there is nothing to guard against. This presence won't demand entry. It will be a return, like walking into a house you've never seen but somehow remember. A soul home. In Buddhist teachings, this kind of meeting is called a karmic resonance. It means two souls vibrated in the same frequency before birth and vowed to find each other again. Not for romance, but for remembrance. In Christian mysticism, it's called divine appointment. A crossing of paths scripted by the divine long before your first breath. These are not ordinary encounters. They are portals. And when you step through, you do not return the same. This soul may not even look like what your mind imagined. They may not say the right things. They may not come in a package that checks the boxes you were taught to desire. But what they will carry is light. Not the blinding kind, the steady kind, the kind that mirrors your own fire and doesn't fear its heat. And that's what changes everything. Because for the first time in a long time, Sagittarius, you won't be the only one holding the torch. You won't be the only one seeing in the dark. Someone else will sit beside your flame, not to be warmed, but to add their own. And here's the truth no one tells you. You didn't stop believing in love. You just stopped believing someone would ever love you the way you needed to be loved. With spaciousness, with freedom, with reverence for your wildness and tenderness alike. You've always been too vast for shallow waters. Too spiritual for superficial games. You need depth, truth, and laughter that echoes through the bones. And now that's what's on its way. Not as a reward for your pain, but as a reflection of your growth. You've become the version of yourself you once dreamed of being. And that version, calm, healed, grounded, glowing, that version is who this soul has been waiting for. They too have wandered. They too have been broken open by life. They are not arriving with perfection, but with sincerity. And the moment your eyes meet, something wordless will pass between you. A knowing, a yes, a sacred I remember. Not from this lifetime perhaps, but from somewhere beyond language, beyond timelines, beyond logic. And it will be enough. But dear Sagittarius, before they arrive, before the alignment completes, there is one last release. One last piece of pain you've carried like a sacred object. One last story about who you thought you had to be in order to be worthy of love. That belief, it must go. Not because it's wrong, but because it's too small for who you've become. You no longer need to be needed to feel loved. You no longer need to over-explain to be understood. You no longer need to offer your soul as a sacrifice just to keep someone close. That part of the story is over. This next chapter will not be written in desperation. It will be written in presence, in mutuality, in moments where neither of you tries to be more or less. You simply are. And in that being, something sacred happens. Healing, but not the kind you cry through. The kind that feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. The kind that makes you forget what it ever felt like to be alone. Are you ready, Sagittarius? Not to fall in love, but to rise in it? To see someone not as a dream, but as a soul carrying their own story, and yet willing to weave it with yours? To be seen not only in your strength but in your softness too? Then write this as a ritual, not to summon them, but to prepare the temple within your heart. I no longer wait. I remember. I receive. This is not just the arrival of love. It is the return of sacred recognition. The meeting of two lights, no longer flickering alone in the dark. Gate 4. You are about to receive back what was taken, but in a form more sacred than you ever imagined. Sagittarius, there are seasons when the universe whispers. And then there are moments like this when it finally responds. You have given so much without being asked, forgave before anyone said sorry, stayed long after others had let go, and held on to hope when even your own reflection seemed uncertain. But what's coming now is not a handout from fate. It's a return, a restoration, a realignment of sacred debts the universe has carried for you across time. Let's speak honestly, because you deserve honesty now more than ever. There were moments when life took things from you that you never even knew how to ask for back. You didn't complain. You didn't demand retribution. You simply gathered the pieces, swept the floor of your soul, and kept walking. They thought you were okay because you were still functioning. But they never saw the parts of yourself you quietly buried just to survive. The dreams you folded like fragile origami. The truths you swallowed so others could stay comfortable. The voice you silenced so peace could exist, even if only on the surface. And perhaps most painful of all, the parts of yourself you willingly gave away, hoping it would earn you safety, love, belonging. But Sagittarius, let me tell you something that only the most ancient souls understand. Nothing sacred is ever truly lost. What vanishes in form is often kept in spirit, protected, hidden, and incubated by the divine until the day you're strong enough to receive it, not with desperation, but with readiness. That day is arriving. No longer do you need to plead. No longer must you negotiate for your worth. The energy of return has been set in motion. And what's extraordinary is that it's not just coming back as it once was. It's coming back evolved, matured, magnified. Yes, there may be a financial breakthrough, a contract, a job, a payment that seems overdue by years. And yet, the truest wealth arriving is not made of currency. It's made of clarity. The ability to look at yourself in the mirror and see someone who did not become bitter, even when bitterness seemed justified. To recognize a soul that kept the door to compassion cracked open, even when storms kept slamming it shut. You are not just receiving a reward. You are being crowned in the quietest of ways with peace. Peace is not the absence of noise or conflict. It is the presence of alignment. A feeling that says, I am exactly where I'm meant to be, with exactly who I've become, no longer rushing toward someone else's idea of destiny. This is the reward no one talks about, the one no one can steal, the kind of peace that makes your decisions clearer, your boundaries gentler but firmer, your silence more potent than arguments, your smile more radiant than explanations. This peace is your new power, and it is already blooming in you. You once gave someone your energy and received confusion. You gave your loyalty and got silence. You offered truth and were met with dismissal. But that exchange is ending. The scales are finally tilting. Not in revenge, but in sacred restoration. The universe is not repaying you because you were wronged. It is blessing you because you remain true to your higher nature despite it all. And here's something you may have never considered. What's being returned isn't always the same thing you lost. Sometimes it arrives in a different shape because you are no longer who you were when it left. You might think you want that past opportunity again, that person, that chance. But if it reappeared exactly as it was, it would no longer fit. That's why it had to transform before it returned. A healed you needs a healed gift. A wiser you needs a deeper offering. So when something shows up in your life now, unexpected, gentle, almost surreal, don't second guess it. Don't sabotage it with disbelief. Whisper to yourself, I've waited for this in ways I didn't even realize. This is not karma as punishment or reward. It's karma as balance. You are not being rewarded because you were better than others. You are being met because you chose truth even when it hurt. You chose light, even when the path ahead was dark. And now, the gate that opens is not a doorway to escape, but an invitation to step fully into the version of yourself that no longer doubts her own worth. There may be moments when your old self whispers, is this real? Am I allowed to be this happy? And in those moments, you must respond not with logic, but with presence. Place your hand over your chest. Breathe. Feel your heartbeat steady, strong, unshaken. That rhythm is your permission slip. That rhythm says, yes, you are allowed. Not because you earned it, but because you endured it. Because your soul passed through fire and emerged not hardened, but illuminated. You may also notice people from your past attempting to return, not because they've changed, but because they feel your shift. Your energy no longer feeds them the same way. You are no longer accessible in the old ways. And that too is part of the return. Because sometimes what you receive back is not just blessings. It's the clarity to say no with love. To recognize what no longer deserves to walk beside your peace. To understand that letting go again is not loss. It is protection. The Bible says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. But Sagittarius, let me tell you something softer. Sometimes the table is prepared in the presence of your former self, the one who doubted, who feared, who tried to shrink to be loved. And now she is seated beside you, watching you take up space, watching you be chosen. Not by someone else, but by your own soul. That is the truest reward. You didn't just return. You remembered. You gathered the scattered pieces of yourself and made something whole. So when the reward comes in whatever form it chooses, a message, a moment, a new chapter, don't run. Don't question it to death. Don't make yourself smaller to keep it. Receive it with stillness. Receive it as the version of you that no longer needs to be rescued, that no longer begs the universe for crumbs. Receive it as someone who knows. Everything taken unjustly will either return purified or disappear to make room for something more sacred. If your heart is stirring now, if your breath has softened, then I ask you to write this, not as a wish but as a seal upon your spirit. What left me unjustly shall return in sacred form. And I am ready in grace to receive. This isn't magic. This is soul maturity. This is your inheritance. This is you finally standing not in the ashes of what you lost, but in the garden of what has grown from your unwavering light. Conclusion. You are no longer waiting. You are becoming. Sagittarius, you have walked a road so few could survive with their light intact. You have watched doors close not because you lacked the key, but because the path beyond them would have dimmed your fire. You have poured love into empty hands, held space when no one held you, and listened when your own voice went quiet. But today the world around you feels different because you are different. You are no longer waiting for someone to choose you. You are choosing yourself. This isn't a moment of climax. It's a moment of quiet arrival. You are not stepping into a destiny someone else prepared. You are stepping into the one your soul has been building all along. In silence, in pain, in endurance, in hope. And now the gates are opening. Not loudly, not with drama, but with reverence. The kind of reverence that only the universe holds for souls who kept faith alive when no one was watching. You are not being rescued, Sagittarius. You are being remembered. By your ancestors. By the divine. By the very parts of you that once felt forgotten. This is not the reward for surviving. This is the natural return of what was always yours, now arriving because you are finally ready to receive it. If your spirit whispered yes during this journey, let that be your answer to the universe. Live as if what you've prayed for is already on its way, because it is. And if this message has touched something true within you, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, not just for this channel, but as a way of affirming, I am ready, I have returned, and the light has found me again.